for January 26th for the Finance and Governance Committee. And we have a posting of the agenda and roll call. And then we have the flag of salute to the flag. Let's have the flag salute first. And with that, I'd like to call our city manager to lead us to the salute of the flag of the United States and then a moment of silence. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Please face any flag that's available to you. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Make me feel like a Boy Scout.
You're a Boy Scout now. Thank you so much. Okay, roll call.
Mayor Zaragoza,
Here.
Councilmember Pasua.
Here?
Thank you.
Thank you. And the agenda was posted. Okay, item number B. I don't have any public comments for this item. Is it correct, Madam Clerk? I have one for D2 and D3, but none for public comments.
Correct, Mayor.
Okay, then our next item on the agenda is going to be, this is the city manager the department. It's the First Amendment to the Federal and State Lobbyist Agreement and Resolution on Legislative and Court Opinions Advocacy Letters. The recommendation is the Finance and Governance Committee recommend to the City Council. And you want to go ahead and share the items 1 through 3, Mr. City Manager. And by the way, this is all recorded as per Measure M.
Correct. Thank you, sir. So the presentation was pre-recorded by our staff, Mr. Adam Smith. He's on if there are any questions, and I'm here if there are any questions. And the contractors are all here, our folks from Washington and Sacramento. I would like to make a quick comment. Both of these firms have worked with us for several years now, and they have both been extremely responsive, proactive, and helpful whenever we need them. So we certainly want to continue this very, very fruitful and professional relationship. What we have here, given the circumstances of everything happening in Washington and in Sacramento, as well as the pandemic, we wanted to just narrow the focus for 2021. So it doesn't mean that we can't come back if we have more needs ahead of us, but that's why we have a narrow list this year.
Yeah.
That was the rationale. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Councilmember Basua, do you have any questions you might want to ask on this item?
No, thank you for the report, the video. I have no questions. And as soon as you're ready, Mayor, I'll move the recommended action.
Okay, before I'd like to second, but let me share a couple of items as mentioned by our city manager. Council members and federal and state lobbyists are really important to the city of Oxnard. In fact, they're very important to almost all governmental agencies, but particularly to the city of Oxnard. They'll assist in implementing and developing state and federal strategies to increase potential funding opportunities for the city. And also they're very good in influencing state and federal policies that help us to relate our priorities and also our programs and operations. And I'm sure that HROD Incorporated, John O'Connell has been with the city for many, many years. And there's a lot of items that are looked at the report that we've implemented, that really has helped the city tremendously in working with the policymakers in Sacramento and also in DC. So with that in mind, does our consultant like to share a couple of words, if any at all? I know they're muted.
Hi, this is Christy Foy with Arnold and Associates. I just want to say thank you very much for the opportunity to work with the city over the years. It's been a very productive relationship, and we look forward to continued success in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate that. And again, like I said, I've worked with quite a few lobbyists, and I've worked with John O'Connell in the past, and it's a pleasure to continue working with him, representing again the feds, and also representing us with the feds in DC and Sacramento. So with that in mind, I will second the motion that Councilmember Basua mentioned. Roll call.
Councilmember Basua,
Yes.
Mayor Zaragoza.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 2-0.
Thank you, and that's approved.
Thank you to both of our teams here who are online. We will have, I believe the mayor will execute the contract tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, no,
again.
I'm sorry, at the council meeting very soon.
Yeah, this is going to be going over to the full city council. But again, thank you to our lobbyists, for the Sacramento and DC. Thank you again for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Mhm. Our next item is the Finance Department, and this is the budget mid-year review. And we have several recommendations, and I'm sure that this is also online as per Measure M, a pre-recorded presentation. And Councilman Basua, do you have any concerns or questions we might ask Ken, Riper or
No,
staff?
I do have just one question in regards to the allocation of an additional administrative assistant for the council. Can we just get, are we adding additional staff for the council?
Yes.
Yes, we are.
Mhm.
Okay, and in what role will this person play for the council?
Councilman Basua, we are, as you know, we have Luli has been taking care of all council members and also the city manager and I have now decided to be there every single day from 8 hours a day and we need additional staff, to help us out and potentially this person can help us out, and we can share this person, to help us, all of us for that matter. And so that's why we're asking for the additional FTE.
I see. Okay.
Yes,
Go ahead, Mr.
very
City Ma-
quickly, and I strongly, strongly recommend this.
Okay.
Because-
No, I saw the video, and that was the only thing that kind of stood out, was the addition to the council, adding additional staff. And as you know, with all our budget cuts and everything that happened, that was just a concern of mine, but I definitely don't have any objections if that is what is needed in order to have a functioning council, then great. I'm all for it. I do want to make a few comments in regards to the presentation. Great presentation, Kevin. I greatly was pleasantly surprised at the money that was coming in through the general fund. Also, I just want to make a comment in regards to Measure O. And I've been I've been saying this over and over again. We do really need to wean off Measure O. So I'm looking forward to hearing how we're going to be accomplishing that within the next few years. And thank you, Kevin, and to your team. And having the mid-year review now is extremely positive, and I hope my colleagues understand all the work that has gone into bringing this report to the council. Being on the other side of things on what I do 9 hours a day, I know how extremely hard your staff has worked at this, Kevin, and they're to be commended. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Council Member. Yes, Budget Division staff and the budget liaisons and all the operating departments put in a ton of work. So we appreciate the recognition.
And yeah, let me also, is that a motion that you are putting together? No, I'll second it now. But I'll
Yes.
share
Yes,
a couple of
yeah.
comments. I really reviewed this, the budget, and it's an excellent report, by the way, and the revenues projected are significantly greater and much better than we had in the past. And again, as you mentioned in your report, there were several governmental revenue sources that really helped us out, like the CARES Act, the state and county revenues that they were given to us, and also the other amendments that you did in the mid-year budget. They were well done, and the transparency there, I think, is really, really important to all of us. And one of the things that we looked at, and we were looking at, the councils in the past they wanted a reserve of 12%, if we've met that. And also additionally, in the enterprise funds, we're looking at a 25% reserves, and I think at one point we were about 60, and then we were about 50, and so forth. So I think that's really great. And also with the Measure O, I think is doing very well too. And also the fire department, as you know, rearranging their priorities, and there's I think a savings of $700,000+ in the savings that they're going to have, even though they're going to have a minor increase, but they're also going to have a reserve of $800,000+, not reserve, additional dollars to work with. So I think it really is going to help us in Measure E too, which I think is going to be really important. So anything else you might want to share with that?
That was a good summary. Thank you, Mayor.
We're okay? Okay, so I'll second that. And roll call?
Mayor Zaragoza,
Yes.
Councilmember Basua.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes 2-0.
Thank you so much. Our next item, of course, is going to be this is a city manager's report. This is the committee, subjects committee, scoping of council's 2021-25 5-year priorities. And the recommendations of the Finance and Governance Committee scope through the lenses of the committee's subject areas, the parameters for upcoming council priority discussions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Interesting for me to be attending the committees tonight to not make a presentation. It still feels,
And
oh,
for,
I think there was.
I'm sorry, D2, and I'm sorry. My apologies. I have one.
I
one
think
public
do we need to go back to that item formally?
Yes.
Okay. We're gonna return to item 2 for public comment, and then we'll pick up item 3 again. We'll start over. Thank you.
My apologies. Item 2, I have Ray Patel that wanted to make some comments. Ray, my apologies. And then, so I won't forget, on item 3, we have Lucy Cartagena. But first of all, for D2, we have Ray. 3 minutes.
Mr. Blatel,
Yes,
are you there? You have 3 minutes.
thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Committee chair and committee members. Regarding item D2, the fire department, it said got a 3.5 million increase in expenditures. 1.5 million will be reimbursed, or is expected to be reimbursed. Again, too much overtime. Looks like 1.9 million, which includes 0.4 million of unexpected overtime. It was stated that overtime costs were due to COVID-19 quarantining of personnel. The fact is, overtime has been an issue even before COVID-19 was a common household term. I've brought this to the attention of the council, staff, and public many times. Let's face it, public safety overtime is an ever-increasing issue, which no one wants to solve, much less face. Vacancy savings. I'm not buying this one either. This is a result of budgeting for personnel that don't exist. That's like accounting for expenditures that don't exist. And this excess budget appropriation just gets kicked down the road and added to the next budget cycle, on and on. For environmental resources revenue, line item 16, other revenue, a 271% increase. How do you get 271%? This line item started out as $0, and now the new estimate is $0.1 million. How can you compute this 271%? With one value being 0, an increase can't be computed. You can't divide by 0. And then I wonder what was the source of this revenue. Relative to all the position control resolutions, the city council labor partial appropriation of $55,000. And it's going to be more next year. I think it's strange that council member Basua isn't even aware of the need. And who else isn't aware? It's surprising to these council members. I mean, whose idea was this? But then again, Why not? Everyone else on staff has deputies and assistants, so why not? Regarding finance, 2 more FTEs for finance for $319,000, but these are not at the worker B level. One is an assistant chief financial officer and the other an admin assistant. Let me give you an analogy. Assume a work crew which is charged with digging a ditch by hand. Hiring one more crew chief will not get the work done any faster unless this person has a shovel in it on his or her hand. I don't imagine these added FTEs will have a shovel. Furthermore, there is a promise of even more hires next year. It's never ending. Whatever new Measure E money brings
30
in
seconds.
will quickly be absorbed by salaries and associated costs such as pensions, generous benefits, and all. Wasn't automation via this new software tool supposed to make for more efficiency? Looks like it's not, just adding more cost. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Raim. Can we share some information regarding the firefighters? You know, I know that that we've reduced quite a bit of overtime on that. So and also there is some because of COVID and also some other short staff items that we FTEs that we had in the fire department. Can we share a bit?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, will be happy to discuss restructuring the fire department's budget to accurately reflect what the real needs are. And just to be respectful to Mr. Littell, we simply have some fundamental disagreements about how to run and organize this city. And we've had many exchanges with him very respectfully, but we do respectfully disagree. And we'll have the detailed conversations about this as we in the lead up to the budget discussions.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Do we have to vote on this item, City Attorney?
It would be simple to do so and
Okay.
would bypass anybody taking objection to not doing so.
Okay, so Councilmember Basua, do you still have a first on this item?
Yes, motion to take this to the full council. Thank you.
And I'll second it. Roll call.
Councilmember Basua?
Aye.
Mayor Zaragoza?
Yes, aye.
Thank you. Motion passes 2-0.
Thank you. So now we'll go back to the city managers on item.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I will say though, on the last item, the addition for the assistant for the mayor and the council for the elected officials is my idea. You know, when I got here 2.5 years ago, one of the first things I learned is that the city manager's executive assistant serves the entire elected body and the city manager. It hasn't worked well, especially for me. And in a city of this size, your office really needs an assistant. And I can tell you, as we head into the future, beyond our time here, as this city's population grows, when you look at the size of each council district and the number of constituents for each council member and for the mayor at large, we're going to grow. Again, this is beyond our time. So this is not happening any year soon, but I can foresee this as the population grows. As you can see in other larger cities, council members will have to have their own assistants just to keep up with constituent services, constituent demands, constituent questions, constituent complaints, and constituent just regular discussion. So as the city grows, that will happen.
And
So I
Mr.
just want to
City,
clarify that.
and for the public too, Mr. City Manager, one of the things that I made a decision to be at my office at least 8 hours a day, you know, so 5 days a week. So, and I think it's important because we can take care of a lot of emails, a lot of concerns, and especially when we had this windstorm and again, we also are going to have a major storm coming up, the rainstorm that's coming up, and those issues need to be taken care of immediately. And being there in the office 8 hours a day, working with staff and working with you really helps out. And again, we can also, the staff is going to be available for other council members too
Right.
that need help.
And we certainly appreciate you being here with us
Thank you.
every day.
Thank you.
So that's actually a good segue into item number 3, which is the having each committee scope the parameters for the upcoming council workshop to set the city council's 5-year priorities for the period 2021 to 2025. Again, it's odd as we I don't know, have become accustomed to these new restraints on how we conduct business at the council meetings, thanks to Measure M. It's just odd in the sense of having a fluid decision-making process. But so I trust that everyone's viewed the pre-recorded video. I hope you have memorized everything that was stated there, so we can just continue.
Is that a test?
Yes. So, but I would like to try to frame the committee's discussion, and I will do this at each of tonight's 3 committees. At this stage in the process, we're still very, very high level. We're still at 30,000 feet. So the feedback we need from the committee this evening, through the lens for now, just of this committee, when we get to the full council workshop, then everybody's, every topic is game for every council member and the mayor. But for this committee, for the purposes of this committee, we want to scope out, again, sort of guide rails for the priorities. So again, to frame it, a couple of things to keep in mind at the 30,000 foot level is we recommend that one of the emphasis areas is to continue to turn City Hall into a high functioning organization. And that's where I will be very strongly recommending things like adding staff in positions that are necessary to not only conduct city business at the highest levels possible, but also to properly manage the workflows and to supervise so that we are minimizing the number of mistakes that this organization has experienced over the years. Also, of course, we want to aim to restore levels of services that have been cut over the years, services and programs to the community. And of course, with a 5-year outlook, you know, of 1 or 2 major new investments that benefit the entire city, I believe are appropriate as aspirations. The other thing to frame the scoping for the Finance and Governance Committee is to recall the 9 major areas of investment that we had discussed publicly going back to last December in terms of Measure E investments. So what we did was we recommended continuing with the 4 prior priorities from the council, and we added one specifically calling out public safety. And so for the purposes of this committee, the bulk of the focus is on organizational effectiveness. And I want to read for the viewing audience just what the description is, which is to reinforce, stabilize, improve, and strengthen the organizational foundation of the city in order to build a modern, high-functioning city government that effectively and efficiently supports the operating departments in providing high-quality services and programs for our residents and businesses. So when we take the bucket of investments from the Measure E, for lack of a better term, menu page, the one that goes in here is securing long-term financial sustainability, which includes replenishing the city's reserves, continuing to improve our financial management accountability and expanding transparency for those items, but also to make sure the city is securely situated to be self-sufficient and able to respond to any of a variety of emergencies and natural disasters that can beset this community. Obviously, we're still in the middle of one that we weren't really expecting here at the local level. So what we need from this committee is, are there any other high, 30,000 foot level areas from this committee's perspective that you want to help guide us through in preparing for the council workshop next month? And we're going to take the feedback from every committee tonight, and then we will put out a new community survey based on the staff recommendations and the council committee feedback to try to get public input on those priorities. And that's my effort to
Indeed.
frame your discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Councilmember Basua, do you have any comments that you'd like to share?
Um, th- I did see the presentation. Thank you, Mr. Nguyen, for that. In your presentation, you asked this committee to focus on one area only. Mayor, do you want to just focus on that one area and then allow all the other committees to do the same for theirs?
The organizational effectiveness.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So, Mr. Nguyen, if you can maybe start us off with that conversation as far as what you see the priorities that need to come to the council within this subject of organizational effectiveness. I know part of the presentation was making sure that our reserve funds were up to par. And I think that's really, really important. I think that's one of the things that we should really focus on first. Also, natural disasters is extremely important. You mentioned in your presentation about the earthquake in Indonesia, and it's not a matter of, if it's going to happen, it's when it's going to happen. Do we have the resources available to make sure that our citizens are going to be taken care of? So that's extremely important. Also, as far as the organization goes, you mentioned key players, and I'm going to assume you mean key staff. If you can please let us know what it is that you're thinking and what the organization needs to be efficient. That's what I would like to hear more about.
You want me to share my part and then?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Well, thank you, Councilmember. I think we're on the same page, and I also saw the video and the perspective that you were looking for is organizational effectiveness, and that's what we looked at, and we really summarize slide 7, that your organizational effectiveness. But I just want to share with you that just a prior look at the mid-year budget, we have an excellent budget, an excellent revenue projection, much greater than what we had before. And again, I want to share again that was due to the CARES Act and due to state and county revenues and other amendments to the mid-year budget that are going to help us in some of the securing the long-term financial stability, like replenishing the city reserves. As I mentioned before, we're looking at 12% for the general fund, and of course maintaining the 25% for the utilities, for the enterprise funds. So I think that was extremely important, and also that's going to give us some transparency. As you remember, one of the things that I mentioned before that I like to see quarterly reports from from staff, so we can look at where we're at, and that'll help us in the transparency part of the financial accountability. And also the other item too that we talked about to improve the self-sufficiency that Councilmember Basua just mentioned is the earthquakes. Or in fact, right now we have a worse than an earthquake is a pandemic that we have now. That's really horrible. That we need to make sure that we continue to be financially stable, and also wildfires. Even though we don't live close to the mountains, when we had the Thomas Fire here in Ventura and Santa Paula and all the way to Montecito, we had ash here in our city like you wouldn't believe. In fact, when I woke up the next morning, it looked like snow out there with nothing but ashes and on your lawns and the roofs and so forth. And we have a lot of people that have asthma, people that have other health issues that potentially we need to help out. To me, it was a health and safety issue. And those are the kind of things I think we need to look forward to be ready to be self-sufficient for those horrible, catastrophic things that are going to happen. It's a natural thing that happens every so often. Earthquakes, the last earthquake we had here, I remember it was in 1994, where there was 3 days that believe it or not, I had one of my kids was still a baby, and we wanted to find milk, and we were out there looking at different stores and we couldn't find any milk. So we need to prepare for those things as our personal issues, and also as governmental persons to make sure that we're there. So those are the kind of things that I like to see in preparing for the organizational effectiveness, and also to have the proper staff. As
Mhm.
we mentioned before, for the city council members, I cannot believe that we only had one individual, Luli, taking care of the city manager and 6 or 7 council members and also the mayor. And and again, when I was at the county, I had 4 staff members that really helped us out tremendously. So,
Yes.
oops.
And I'd heard about that, which is why, Mr. Mayor, you may recall in our very first meeting, one of the first things I said to you was, you can't have Luli.
Exactly right. So I
So,
think that efficiency is really important, and
yes. So thank you for both your comments and questions. So getting back to, in adding on to Mr. Mayor, what you said, getting back to Councilwoman Basua's
Mhm.
initial discussion, a couple of examples would be in terms of staffing, and you are correct. I think I did say players, but of course I did mean staff. So and when we go through this process, ultimately, once the council adopts your priorities, then we will be sure that those priorities are reflected in the upcoming budget as well as subsequent budgets throughout the 5-year program here. So in that process, we will bring in fine detail what it means when we say, for example, getting the right staff, whether it's making changes to existing positions or adding new staff. That will be very clear in the budget. The other thing, and our deputy city managers just reminded me of this, is we also need to restore a training budget. One of the casualties of severe budget cuts over the years. And in many of our departments, we've had to cobble together funds for the required trainings for people who have to provide work that meets various state mandates, or that their professions require ongoing education and training, or renewing permits and licenses and so on. But we really need a more robust training program to keep our staff up to date with the most recent best practices, changes in law, changes in state policy, and so on that impact us, but also as a way to continue our staff's individual professional development, so that they don't have a stagnant experience working for this community.
Mr. City Manager, don't forget your thoughts. Or can I just share something real quickly? I just got back from the Board of Supervisors about a month or so ago, but the county has a really good program called the LEAP program that trains managers from Management 101 to making a
Right.
presentation and so forth, and also keeping up with all the policies and all the issues that come from Sacramento or DC. And there's an opportunity there to, if we wanted to partner with the county, I mentioned to our CEO and our HR person there in the county, an opportunity to train our people, and they're willing to accept, our managers, to, if they wanted to have some training. So
And that providing that level of training is something we're very envious of those organizations that have it.
thank you.
So thank you for that.
Mhm.
Also, just making sure that we have the right number of staff in the right positions, just to make sure that the supervision ratio is appropriate, that the span of control for any division or department isn't too great. And then in adding to what you said, Mr. Mayor, I really strongly recommend investing in a new 21st century robust disaster preparedness program. So I look forward to making that presentation when the time comes. Every jurisdiction right now is well aware that as we endure this pandemic, one other emergency on top of it could just really, really wipe us out. Knock on wood, or God forbid, an earthquake right now
That's right.
is just something that would be very, very difficult for us to get through on top of the pandemic. But we need to have a program, a disaster preparedness program that fully engages the community in an ongoing, with an ongoing process that is not forgotten. Once we have, any given training, then people just forget about it a few months and away. So that's something we really, really want to work on. And while that particular category could very well be in the public safety section and there's clear overlap, it's also really important in this category, because if we can't get our community back up and running after a major incident, that means business halts, and that ultimately means revenues halt. And it's a very dangerous thing to have a prolonged recovery after an incident like an earthquake. So I will stop there and hopefully have hear more discussion from you.
And also, I think one of the things that's really important for the public to know is that we have the CERT program that the fire department has, and those are volunteers from the community that potentially can help us within the 1 to 3 days of after a disaster, because we cannot depend on public safety officials to help us, and the CERT individuals, which is a volunteer program that can really help us tremendously.
Right.
So.
And part of our goal is to get those kinds of programs onto ongoing steroids.
Yeah, thank you. And before we make a motion, we have a speaker on this item, and that's Lucy Cartaneja. If she is on, she's not on?
Not available.
So can I ask
Yeah. Mhm.
either Councilwoman Basur or you, Mr. Mayor, do you have anything else you want to add? Because we're going to take your comments and work it into our survey so that the community can help, can provide some feedback in terms of prioritizing. Because you both mentioned several items, and at some point the council as a whole will still need to prioritize.
And I think if I understand what you're saying is this is a public review right now, setting up the priorities.
Mhm.
And then we're going to have a public focus section where we can, that each council member, is that part of what we're doing now?
Right. So today we're asking, again, each committee just to give us the general parameters,
Mhm.
again, the 30,000 foot issues that you think need to be a priority in the next 5 years, not forever, but just in the
Right.
next 5 years. We take that information from all the committees, and then we put together a survey that we will issue to the community at large, and we get that input back to when we come to the council. We have a special city council workshops,
yeah.
focused on prioritizing the various priorities.
Okay. And then once we have the workshop, that's going to be in February regarding the 5 years. And then hopefully after we get all that input from the public, then in March,
Right, you'll adopt the
we'll
priorities,
adopt
the
the
council,
priorities.
and
Uh-huh.
then that will guide us in terms of how we form
Mhm.
the annual budget.
But I think some of the important things that you mentioned is in your presentation is to reinforce the stability, improve and strengthen the organization foundation of the city in order to build a modern, high-functioning government. That's really important. That's really important because we need to keep up to speed, with what's happening with the city government, and also to make it more efficient in for the operating departments, and also to provide that high quality of service that our residents and businesses deserve. That's really important to the community and to all of us.
Mhm. And there's a reason that I put that as of the 5 areas of priority, I put that first, because without doing that, it's hard to deliver on the rest.
That's exactly right.
And the other thing about organizational effectiveness is these are not very sexy issues for the public. This is mostly internal, but it's when we fall down in these areas is when the mistakes happen, and then it becomes a public issue. But these are not very interesting issues, but they are very important issues.
And one thing you said too is in your report is they have to be realistic,
Yes.
and they have to be attainable.
Yes.
and we have to have metrics,
Yes.
and we have to hopefully work with Measure E in the budget.
Right.
So something that's realistic with metrics and time period, time with a timetable that we can accomplish.
Right. And that will come with the budget.
That's right. That's all I have, and we don't have, the speaker that we had is not available. So,
So,
we-
Mayor, if I may,
go ahead.
interject here for a second. So, Mr. City Manager, so are you, I know we're looking at organizational effectiveness and that you asked us in this committee to look at that. But you also were asking for additional feedback. Are you just asking for additional feedback when it comes to this subject, or are you asking that we touch on the different areas?
For this subject, when we have the full council workshop
right.
is when you get to discuss all the areas as a whole council meeting.
Yeah, and I think one thing I think is really important, and a message that I want to bring forward is having the right staff in place in order to get the right financials in place. I think that's going to be really, really, really instrumental, because we just can't, start asking for a wish list of things that we would like and then figure out how to pay for it later. So I think when you come to organizational effectiveness, really having what you call the key players, key staff within the organization, knowing what they're doing, and I think it's extremely important. And I think that's going to be the foundation and how we get started with what we're trying to accomplish right now. So I think it's really important. I would like to hear more about you, that you're there at City Hall, what it is that you are looking for, as far as, and what do you think that is needed in order to help modernize the city of Oxnard. It's going to be really, really important for us to, as a council members and policymakers, to hear what it is that you believe the challenges are and how it is that we can assist you in trying to bring our vision to play. Because at the end of the day, we can give you a list of visions, but unless you have the right staff members, nothing's going to happen. So it's going to start here with your organizational effectiveness.
Right. Thank you, and I couldn't agree more. So if this gets through the process and becomes a council priority, and at the workshop, we will provide that level of detail in terms of what do we, if you want this and we want this too, what does it mean? What does it look like? We will discuss that at the workshop, and we look forward to that.
and I think also too, I think it's important that we listen to see what the city council wants and what the public wants. And of course, we're going to start from point A to point B.
Mhm.
And at one point, when it come down to the middle ground, can we afford it? Is it doable? Are the metrics there? Do we have enough money to do so? And that's information that I think you need and staff needs in order to set the priorities.
Right. Yes. So
We need a roadmap.
right. So that's a great segue for me. So it's obviously the council's role and job to determine the priorities for the next 5 years. My job is to try to keep it realistic and achievable and all that. So when you say to me, okay, Mr. City Manager, here are the priorities in each of these areas, then I can turn around with staff and say, okay, to achieve priority A, here's what we need, here's why we need it, here's how much it'll cost, and here's how long it will take. And that's part of how we have the metrics year by year, so you can actually follow, track, and measure progress and hold me accountable on behalf of the entire organization. But when we get to the workshop and you see all the baskets of priorities, then you're going to have to start to most likely to narrow it down, because it's important for me to be able to say, okay, 30 is too many. We can't possibly achieve all these in the next 5 years, in part because we don't have the resources, the time, or the staff to get all of it done. So we'll go through that exercise, which I think is really important. But it does get back to what you both are saying is, it's one thing to say, here's a priority. It's another thing to acknowledge, can we do it? And chances are we can. It really comes down to what is it going to take? What is it going to cost? And what is the timeline? How fast can we do it? And then ultimately the council may decide, well, on these priorities, we want it done within 2 years. So that means we accelerate whatever those are and hence fund them at a higher rate than some of the others. But I think that's the important process here. And it's actually really exciting also.
And I think, Mr. City Managers, like anything else, we set those goals and we set the roadmap. And is it realistic? Is it achievable? And potentially too, in the process, we might have to amend accordingly.
Right.
Because, it's like a budget. You
Right.
set a budget and the budget is an estimate. And as you progress in that budget, either we're going to have more monies to do so or less monies.
Right.
And consequently, we can amend accordingly.
Right. We may have to. This pandemic is a perfect example of having to course correct drastically for everyone, not just us. So you don't know what may be thrown at this community in the next 5 years, but if we plan well enough and if we keep our priorities realistic, again, albeit aspirational, we should be able to deliver, because our job on staff is to be realistic with you in saying, if you want priority A, this is what it will take, and then the council will have to decide, okay, we want that at that level, or we want that at a higher level or a lower level. And then again, you hold me accountable on behalf of the entire organization, because if we say we can achieve these priorities in this timeline with this budget, we should be able to hit most of the marks pending any major influences externally. So we look forward to this process.
Thank you. Council member, are you okay? Okay, did we try Lucy again? Is she on?
Not available, Mayor.
Okay, so do we have a motion on this item? I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Roll call.
Councilmember Basua,
Aye.
Mayor Zaragoza.
Aye.
Motion passes 2-0.
Okay, council member, do we have any items for future agendas on this for governance and finance? Do you have any?
Yes. Really, just kind of going off of what you have been talking about, Mayor, about having the quarterly reports. I just want to see Kevin's staff, if that's something that's actually feasible, and if we can, is that something that we can implement? I'd be kind of curious if we have enough staff right now in order to implement, because I think it's important.
Kevin? Mhm.
Yeah. Quarterly financial reports, quarterly budget reports are not feasible with current staffing levels.
there isn't.
Semi-annual, the budget's a huge lift, obviously, and the mid-year was a huge lift. So yeah, for the time being, probably stick with semi-annual.
Semi-annuals, but okay.
Yeah.
I,
And the other thing is that we gear the semi-annual to the receipt of property tax and then the big sales tax producers. So I don't think there's that much value added to the revenue forecast if we go quarterly. On the expenditure side, maybe, but yeah, I would stick with semi-annual.
and semi-annual makes sense because I think the county, they estimate their funding in January and they report it in June, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, that.
Okay. Thank you both.
Good point. Mhm.
Okay.
Okay.
That's all, Mayor.
Thank you. So this item is approved. So then we're going to adjourn, and of course, our next community service and public housing is going to be at 6:45. So we're adjourned on this item. Thank you.